Hi! In today's episode, I'm going to talk about how we would implement a solution on service design. On my previous episodes, I was explaining about how do we find the right problem, then how to find the right solution, but today we're going to talk mostly about how do we implement that solution, because after ideation, prototyping, and pretotyping, what would be next would be actually doing and implementing everything, ensuring that the services are launched effectively. And for this, measurement and understanding the real world impact is going to be very, very important. So, if we go into the initial steps that would take us from the prototype into the production, we have to consider that implementation is going to involve a lot of parties most of the times. So it's not only going to be you or your team, or even if it's a small startup, you can't do it by yourself. You're going to have to involve everyone in your organization most likely, because you're going to either need some change management if it's an organizational procedure, you're going to need software development if it's going to be a digital product, you might need product development if it's a physical product, or even architecture, construction if it's more of a physical environment. So the first main step that you should take is breaking all of these silos. And so silos were created initially so in organizations everyone would have something to work on. But silos are very dangerous when you're implementing a solution, because most of the teams will be either biased or they will be closed into hearing what the other team has to say. So this is going to be the first and most important step. Maybe you can get someone from each area, or if it's a startup, just meeting with the different stakeholders or people that you might need in order to implement the solution. That's the first step. And the second step for implementation is going to be one that's pretty obvious, and it's gaining all of this buy-in from stakeholders and basically from the budget. Because gaining all of this buy-in is something where most companies struggle. Many companies know what their problems are, they know how to potentially fix them, but when they go to management and they tell them, hey, I have this problem, we have the solution, can we try it? They might say like, oh, we're tight on budget, let's postpone it, or things are working as they currently are, so we don't have to fix this problem. And so gaining all of this buy-in is going to be extremely crucial for implementation. And then also not only from management, but from all of the silos that I was mentioning before. If you're bringing in all of your stakeholders, you have to get the buy-in from the software developers to prioritize your task. You have to get buy-in from finance people. You have to get buy-in from other different teams so you can start implementing your idea. So these two things are going to be very, very important. Once you have this, you should also consider that implementation is not going to be very fast and lean and it will fix everything. Implementation is also going to be iterative, which means just like research, just like ideation, just like prototyping, it's not going to be a linear process and it will require many versions. So many people talk about MVPs when they're doing some implementation. What I learned in this class is that you should aim for MLPs, or Minimum Lovable Product. Because if you start with a minimum lovable product, you're literally shifting your focus from merely viable, so something that works, to lovable, which will be something that people will like, will love, and will implement. And so this usually helps gain traction in all of the early stages of implementation, because it provides this positive user experience from the outset, and most of the times people get excited about building a minimum lovable product rather than just a minimum viable product. So if in your company you build MVPs, you can start telling them to build MLPs. And if in your company you build MVPs, of course you are already aware of this, MLPs will also require a lot of pilots and different rollouts. So implementing new services will often begin similarly with local pilots and test roll-ups before you can actually scale it. And this is going to be the same either way, so that's why I was saying it might be a very slow process. and you might have to deal with bureaucracy, gaining buy-in, and separating the silos, but for sure it's going to be worth it. What you have to remember is that you should never forget the user side. And for the user side, you should always be setting expectations. And I mentioned this in one of my first episodes around service design, but expectations are going to be the key point in order to have satisfied users. Because if you give your users expectations, you are kind of allowing them to plan or to make alternative choices. And you can tell them what to expect and what to not expect from your product. And this is fine because sometimes you don't want all of your users to be buying from you. Maybe they need another company in order to fulfill their goals. But so you have to manage the expectations, and especially all of the outlier expectations that can quickly become universal or can potentially disrupt services that fail to adapt. So it will be very, very costly for a company that won't clearly explain what they can and can't do. And so leading users to clearly know your expectations will probably make them call support less because it won't be necessary, and you will also save a lot of costs. So now that you already know what you should consider in your company and what you should consider for the user, let's move on into what you should be doing on the back end while all of this implementation is happening. And basically, it will just be gathering more data. I told you about the importance of doing research and gathering data in another of my episodes, but here our main data source is going to be KPIs, because we want to be combining user insights with quantitative data. And this is going to be vital for prioritizing important points in the service journey. So measuring the impact, I won't tell you which are the top KPIs because it literally depends on any project that you're implementing, but it can range from improved customer satisfaction, reduced call center costs, service costs, etc. It can be a lot of different things, and it's usually aligned with the organizational goal and also with the user problem that you identified. But what you want to be doing is identifying pain points, identifying where is the user dropping out of your service. Did you fix something and the dropouts were still the same? Because then you shouldn't continue maybe with that implementation and you should stop and rethink everything. Data is going to be telling you a lot of things, so make sure to gather as much as possible and also be flexible to it, because sometimes data is giving us a lot of information of what we should do, but companies decide to ignore it because it's already what we planned, it's already in our budget, it's already in our timeline. So don't be fooled by that. You should always keep going back to the data, and the data will be your main source for, again, getting buy-in and breaking the silos in any type of company. And what you have to think also is that consistency here is going to be very important across the service, across channels, over time, and between users. All of these ones, because you have to utilize this journey management software maybe, so you can provide this real-time data constantly and compare it with data that you either had before or data that you've had throughout the rollout. And another useful tip that we received is that you can conduct team retros, or there are other companies that call them, for example, post-mortem. It doesn't matter how you call them, but what you have to do is basically meeting with the entire team and sharing what worked, what didn't, how can you do to fix it for next time. Over here, you can maybe talk about what slowed you down, which were the motivating factors that would help you push forward, and how can you continuously improve the work that you're doing. Because good service design is going to help organizations move from a product-oriented perspective to a solutions-based, and then later to a customer-centric approach. So it's no longer the product that matters or the solution, it's the customer. And if you already have this vision in your company, it's going to be a very sustainable company, because you will have your eyes on the only thing that matters, which are going to be users' needs and users' problems, and how you can help them solve them in a way that is useful for them. So after all of this, we would entirely close all of the loop that would come from service design. We started by researching and looking into what the real problem is, then creating ideas and gathering data, then into prototyping and bringing these ideas to life, and then into rollout phase. So you would already have all of the different pieces here that you need in order to implement the changes of your service, and that would be it, right? Well, kind of. In my next episode, I'm going to explain how you need to embed all of these concepts of service design into more of a continuous thing in your company. Because if you just make it a one project thing, it won't fix a lot of things, or you'll be spending a lot of money in service design consultants or just consultants overall that will do exactly this thing every time that they go to your company. So I'll be talking about how you can implement this in the long term, and also some other additional strategies to improve your service design skills. I hope this episode was useful. Let me know in the comments if you liked it and what did you learn from it. And also share it with a friend who also wants to learn about MBA concepts so we can all keep spreading knowledge together. Also, give me a review if you can, because this helps the podcast tremendously and it helps me reach even more people globally so I can keep sharing my MBA knowledge. I'll see you next week.